brighter somewhere. Got to be birds flying higher in a sky more blue.
Good morning. Welcome to Right Thinking with Steve Copeland. I'm your host, Steve Copeland, and thank you for tuning in. Let's have a great day. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today, and glad to be with you again today. So today is probably that halfway point. We're right halfway between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think if we pulled out the calendars, it's almost exact. And so I'm still enjoying the thoughts of that wonderful day that I had at Thanksgiving. And now we're looking forward to Christmas. But you know, a lot of people look forward to Christmas because of the gift giving and the meals and so forth. And I just want to put in a plug right now for Jeff Heiser, his Connect 10 magazine. The December issue is Christmas Around the World. And so he asked me to write an article, or at least I'm a regular with them the last 7 or 8 months. And I wrote an article for Connect 10. Go to Jeffrey, JEFFREY, HEISER.com, JeffreyHeiser.com, and then go to the place where you pull up off the menu, Connect 10, and it's the December issue. And so immediately when he asked me to write a Christmas Around the World, I got to thinking, my wife and I, who's going to be on the show next week, by the way, it's a real treat for everybody. I just want to make sure you check out that show. It's our last live show before the end of the year, and it's going to be wonderful. It's kind of a review of the year and also thanking all the people that have helped us get this far, and then we're going to have, at the end of the year, we're going to have Richard Kay's Incarceration, Its Effect on Families play on Christmas Day, and then first of the year on New Year's Day, we're going to have a repeat of Recidivism, We Can Win the Fight. So that's just a little housekeeping there. But so I wrote the article on Christmas Around the World, but my wife and I are always talking about the true meaning of Christmas. So I just would like to ask you to check out that, support Jeff Heiser's magazine, and read that article. And so we'll be talking about some things more next year, next week, and then next year I'll be back. So last week Leffert Fate was on the show, and it was his second time. And I've gotten to know Leffert better. I went down to some prisons in South Carolina and ate dinner with Leffert. And he's the Leffert of the TED Talk fame. He was 31 years in the Air Force, and then he retired out of there. He was a command chief. He had a lot of people that he was responsible for. And then he got into South Carolina Department of Corrections, and he was in charge of medical services. And he's an advocate for the mentally ill. And he's just phenomenal what he does. And so last week he came on, and we had a wonderful conversation on another Napoleon Hill book, How to Own Your Own Mind. And I just got to tell you, he said something to me that I get a big kick out of. Right in the beginning, he said, Steve, I'm not your biggest fan right now. I wasn't sure what was coming next. He said, I don't know if I should hug you, he actually said, I don't know if I should kiss you or choke you. And then he told the listeners, some of you probably had a chance to hear it. He said, Steve gave me another one of these books that he said, it's a great book. You're going to really get a lot out of it. And I started reading it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was up till 4 o'clock in the morning still reading that book. But in that book, it covered the major benefits of organized thinking from Napoleon Hill. So I'm telling you right now, it's all about how you think. It's all about your mind. And all the people that really want to help you have a better life, they tell you this. They tell you this. There's one thing that the Lord gave us that no one can take away from us unless you give it away, and that's your thinking, what you think. We all have the right, the power, the ability to think for ourselves. So go to How to Own Your Own Mind. You can go to www.naphill.org and How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill. It's an incredible book. It's life-changing. With that said, a couple weeks ago, we had a new thing take place on the show. Dave Richards, who has been on now, I think that might have been his 9th show. Maybe that was his 8th. He's the guest again today, and he had come up with an idea. And a paraphrase of what his idea was payback, Steve. Donna, every time I do a show with Dave and I ask him questions and interview him kind of stuff to bring out whatever topic that he's agreed to enlighten all of us with, she says, I wouldn't do what Dave does. I wouldn't sit there and allow you to ask him questions like that because, sometimes you make him really get in a direction that he wasn't expecting. And so the last time he was on about 3 weeks ago, he came in and said, I got a new format, Steve. I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be a surprise, but I have confidence in you. And so he came on the show, and we talked about Desiderata, Desiderata, and by Max Ehrman. And I'll tell you what, all of us have something in life that means a whole lot to us. And this poem that we read on the air and talked about for the whole show was on his wall, hanging in a frame, and he grew up reading it. And he's carried that, reading that for his whole life. It has got some of the most beautiful wisdom on how to have a good life. I think the title of the show was A Positive Model to Live By. And so Dave's back again today. I'm going to bring him on in just a second. What we're going to do today, he told me, is, I'll tell you what, Dave's going to be taking over the show pretty soon. I think it's kind of one of those power coups that he's got going here. And so I'm going to let Dave introduce what we're going to do today. So Dave, I'm going to put myself under your good care. And just remember, we're in the middle of the holiday season, so don't hurt me too much, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be back on the air with you. I really do enjoy these hours together. I spend a lot of time with you, and so this is always fun. So I think the context here, is, as you just said, was sharing those methods or processes that we think can help people. So I just made a note while you were talking, and you said it's all about how you think, how to own your own mind. Just think about that. It's all about how you think. And so today's show, Steve and I didn't rehearse this going ahead of time. It's all about how you think is the key thing. And most people, I'd say 99.999 out of 100, in order to think well, you have to keep practicing it. You have to keep working on it. So it's all about how you think. Doesn't mean it just naturally comes to you. Most people in life train themselves to think properly. They read books. They watch movies. They go talk with mentors. They are led by their parents or people they trust. So that's the point. What they're doing is they're learning how to think. And so today's kind of show, what I wanted to talk with Steve about, and Steve and I have talked about this in the past, has to do with one of the truly great Americans of all time. It's Benjamin Franklin. In my mind, Franklin is up there with only two other Americans who I think are as great as him, one being Washington and one being Lincoln. And Franklin was that great a man, and maybe in many ways a more accomplished American you'll ever find. And I'll share a little bit about that with you. But what most people don't know about Franklin was starting at a young age, literally at 20. Starting at 20 years old, Franklin identified 13 virtues, what he called the virtues. And this is as a 20-year-old man. 13 virtues to live his life by. And what Franklin did for the next 60 years, until he died, basically, he had a process that every day he focused on a different virtue. And it actually worked like this. So he had 13 virtues, and every week he would focus on one of the virtues. So frugality was one of the virtues. And so if that was the virtue this week, all week he would focus on it, and he'd keep track of the other 12, but he'd focus on that one. And then the next week he would focus on a different one. And his thinking was that if you do the math, that allowed him to focus 4 times a year, 1 week, on a different virtue. So 4 weeks times 13 virtues is 52 weeks. So he literally went this cycle. He constantly had a cycle where he's focusing on a different virtue every week. But he didn't just leave the other 12 behind. He actually created himself, because he was a printer. That was his trade. He was a printer and a publisher. He created a little sheets of paper. And this week he had a little sheet of paper, and the virtue was temperance. That was what he was focused on. He'd have the 7 days of the week across the top, and he'd have his virtues. And every time he did something that represented a positive accomplishment of that virtue, he just made a little check mark. And so he would look at the end of the week and see how many check marks he had on the different virtues that he was focusing on. So I say that that's a pretty simple method. 13 virtues, focus on them all the time, create a little check sheet. And this guy did that his whole life, because that's how he became grounded, and he built a routine. And in my mind, he was building a routine about how he could think straight. That's what this is all about. So anyways, I thought today Steve and I would talk through the 13 virtues, go into depth, maybe a couple. Most of them have some kind of a spiritual basis to them. Not all of them, but almost all of them relate in some way to a faith organization. You'll see those threads. And I've made some notes along these lines, and I thought we'd just go forth. So with that, Steve, you're welcome, love your comments, but we'll come back a little bit to Franklin. Just, you need to, if you haven't read up on Franklin, you should. He was just a remarkable man in terms of his breadth. So I was just making some notes. Franklin was a very, very accomplished businessman. He managed to start his own company and retire at a young age when people didn't retire. So he was an incredibly accomplished businessman. He was probably the most renowned scientist of the 1700s. I mean, so business guy. Many people would say somebody like Isaac Newton was the most renowned scientist of the 1600s with all the work he did in physics. Well, Franklin's work in energy and many other areas, electricity, were groundbreaking. I mean, this was Nobel kind of prize-winning type of stuff. So he was an incredible scientist, an inventor. The bifocals, the lightning rod, the Franklin stove. I mean, he was a prolific inventor. And then you get to the civic side of what he did. He founded the Philadelphia Fire Department. University of Pennsylvania came from a smaller college that ultimately turned into UPenn. He was the founder of the American Philosophical Society. So, and then you get to his political stuff. He signed the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. He was a prominent abolitionist. Early in his life, he owned slaves, and very quickly he realized that's just not the right thing to do, and became a very early abolitionist. So the point is, here is as accomplished a person as you'll ever find in the history of our country. And if you look at how he trained his mind, he was diligent in just focusing on these basic virtues, what he called the virtues, these traits, to succeed. And that's why, people, I read a lot, Steve reads a lot. Everybody I know that's trying to get ahead is reading. They're reading the words of others who've come before and looking for pearls of wisdom. So with that, we're going to go through some of these, but let me kick it back over to the boss.
Thank you. What I thought I would do today, though, is go silent on you. I've had interviews where people went silent on me, and it's really hard. So you got to pull it out of me today, Dave. I'm not going to speak today. No, I'm just joking. So, Dave, you gave me a title for today. We gave each show a title, and it's Living a Life of Excellence, Benjamin Franklin's 13 Virtues. So this is going to be very interesting. And for those of you that don't really know that much about Benjamin Franklin, when I was a kid in Norfolk, Virginia, we had Ben Franklin 5 and Dime. It was a toy store. And I grew up there. That was my favorite place. So I had an early love for Benjamin Franklin because they had a soda fountain there. And I think, Dave, that's what's wrong with the world right now, is that
not enough soda fountains?
There's not enough soda fountains anymore where you can go in there and just get a banana split or a hamburger with that nice relish on it, and that bun that was just right. And so I spent many days there. But I want to tell one story about Ben Franklin's 5 and Dime store. I'm not going to tell you his name, but